You'll never build self-discipline until you stop needing to feel ready. You've been waiting for the right time. You've been telling yourself that once things calm down, once you have more energy, once you feel ready, you'll finally start doing what you know you should. You say you need to get your mind right first, that you'll start when you're in the right headspace, as if self-discipline is something that requires your emotions' permission. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. You'll never build discipline as long as you keep waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a myth, a comfortable illusion your mind builds to protect you from discomfort. It whispers that the perfect moment is coming, that clarity will appear, that someday you'll wake up with motivation so powerful it will carry you through. But that day doesn't exist. The people who change their lives, who rebuild their minds, who create something meaningful, don't do it because they were ready. They do it because they were tired of waiting. You've mistaken emotional alignment for preparation. You think you need to feel like it to start. You think discipline is supposed to feel inspired, smooth, or easy. But discipline doesn't care about your mood. It begins where your feelings end. It's the moment when your body says no, but your purpose says yes. It's choosing what you said you would do over what you feel like doing. The truth is, you're not waiting to feel ready. You're waiting to stop feeling fear. You're waiting for a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet, one that isn't scared of judgment, failure, or the unknown. But that version of you will never arrive, because it's built through the act of starting, not before it. The only way to become ready is to begin unprepared. The only way to build confidence is to act without it. The illusion of readiness keeps you trapped in an endless loop. You think, you plan, you hesitate, you restart. You convince yourself that thinking about it is progress. You watch one more video, read one more book, plan one more step. Anything to delay the moment you have to actually move. But every second spent waiting for perfect conditions is a second spent reinforcing your own weakness. Look at your life right now. How many goals have you postponed because you weren't ready? How many moments of opportunity have you watched pass by because you needed just a little more clarity, a little more time, a little more confidence? You've been conditioned to believe that readiness is a state of mind, but it's not. It's a consequence of motion. Readiness doesn't come before action. It's created by action. Every disciplined person you admire, every athlete, writer, or creator who seems unshakable, feels the same hesitation you do. The difference is, they act anyway. They don't wait for readiness. They rely on systems, not feelings. They've learned that if they only move when they feel ready, they'll spend their entire life standing still. When you wait for readiness, you're giving your emotions control over your potential. You're saying, "I'll change when I feel like it." But feelings are unstable. They rise and fall with sleep, stress, weather, and doubt. If your discipline depends on emotion, it will collapse every time life becomes uncomfortable. And life is always uncomfortable. That's why most people never change. They wait for a sensation, a moment when everything feels aligned. But growth doesn't feel aligned at first. It feels wrong. It feels like resistance, like friction, like walking through fog. Because discipline requires you to act before clarity, not after. It asks you to move through uncertainty, not around it. You have to stop romanticizing preparation. Stop believing that readiness is what gives you power. It's not. What gives you power is momentum. What makes you strong is motion, even when it's shaky. What builds trust in yourself is doing what you said you would do, especially when you don't feel ready to do it. If you're waiting for motivation, stop. Motivation is fragile. It dies the moment discomfort begins. But discipline, real discipline, is what carries you through when every part of you wants to quit. And that kind of discipline isn't born from readiness, it's born from movement. Here's the hard truth. You will never wake up one morning and suddenly feel ready to change your life. There is no perfect version of you waiting to appear. There is only the version you're willing to build through repetition, discomfort, and faith in your future self. So if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Stop preparing, stop planning, stop waiting to feel like the kind of person who can do it, and just begin. Because the moment you start, everything you were waiting for starts to form. Readiness isn't what precedes action, it's what follows it. And if you can understand that, if you can train your mind to act before it feels ready, then you've already won half the battle. There's a strange kind of safety in postponing your own potential. When you say, "I'm not ready yet," it feels responsible, thoughtful, even wise. You convince yourself that waiting means preparing. You tell yourself you're gathering information, fine-tuning your plan, getting your mindset right. But beneath that logic hides something much simpler and far more dangerous: fear disguised as strategy. The comfort of delay isn't laziness, it's protection. Your mind uses it to shield you from the tension that comes with actually doing the thing. Because doing exposes you. Doing means risking failure, discomfort, judgment. Thinking, on the other hand, feels safe. It gives the illusion of progress without the threat of pain. You can plan endlessly, dream endlessly, talk endlessly, and still tell yourself you're moving forward, when in truth you're standing still. This is the trap of the almost ready mindset. It tricks you into believing that your delay is purposeful, that waiting is a form of wisdom. But wisdom doesn't come from delay, it comes from experience, and experience only comes from action. Every second you spend thinking about doing something instead of doing it is a second you're teaching your brain that hesitation equals safety. You're reinforcing the belief that motion is dangerous, that stillness is security. But security isn't growth. Security is a slow death, one that feels comfortable enough that you don't notice it happening. You tell yourself you're staying still until you're ready, but in reality, you're slowly building an identity around inaction. You become the person who almost did it, who planned to start, who was about to change. And you wear those almosts like invisible chains, calling them patience or timing, when they're really just fear dressed in confidence. You think you're being smart by waiting, but your brain isn't analyzing. It's avoiding. It's not saying, "Let's wait for clarity." It's saying, "Let's stay comfortable." Because the brain's primary job isn't to make you successful, it's to keep you alive. And it interprets change as danger, so it whispers the same lie every time you try to step forward. Not yet. Wait until you're ready. The problem is that readiness never comes, because your emotions are never fully aligned with your ambitions. You can't think your way into courage. You have to act your way into it. Every day you delay, the mountain in your mind grows higher. You give your fears more time to root themselves. You let hesitation harden into habit. And once hesitation becomes habit, it doesn't just slow you down. It becomes your identity. You start saying things like, "I overthink everything. I'm just not consistent. I need to be in the right headspace." Those phrases sound harmless, but they're declarations of surrender. They're ways of telling yourself, "I'm not the kind of person who takes action until I feel perfect." But no one feels perfect. No one ever feels ready. The difference between those who build discipline and those who don't isn't intelligence or motivation. It's the willingness to act without emotional permission. The comfort of delay is powerful because it feels logical. It hides behind phrases like, "I just want to be sure," "I need to plan this out," or "I don't want to fail." But what you're really saying is, "I don't want to feel discomfort." Yet that discomfort is the exact price of growth. The same pain you're avoiding is the doorway to everything you want. You can't protect yourself from life and experience it at the same time. You can't avoid risk and expect transformation. Every great change in your life will always start before you feel ready, before you understand how it will all work out. The difference between progress and paralysis is the decision to move while afraid. And here's the truth that most people don't want to admit. Your need to feel ready is just another form of control. You want to guarantee the outcome before you take the step. You want certainty before courage, but certainty doesn't come first. It's built one action at a time. The person who acts without knowing learns faster than the person who waits for perfect clarity. Think about the moments in your life that changed you. None of them came with certainty. You grew the most when you were scared, unsure, unprepared, but you acted anyway. That's what self-discipline truly is. Trusting action more than emotion, trusting commitment more than comfort. If you want to escape the comfort of delay, you have to become suspicious of your own waiting. You have to ask yourself, am I really preparing or am I protecting myself from discomfort? Most of the time, the answer will sting because you already know it. You're not preparing, you're avoiding. You'll never feel perfectly ready, but you can feel responsible. You can decide that showing up messy, uncertain, and human is still better than staying stuck in the illusion of preparation. Because every time you act before you're ready, you're building evidence that you can be trusted to move, even when the path isn't clear. And once you prove that to yourself, hesitation loses its power. Action becomes easier. Discipline begins to feel natural. Because discipline doesn't start when you feel ready. It starts when you decide you've waited long enough. Your emotions have one job: to keep you safe. Not fulfilled, not disciplined. Safe. Every time you try to change, your emotions will fight back. They'll create resistance, discomfort, anxiety, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something unfamiliar. And the moment you mistake those emotions for truth, you lose control of your life. That's the emotional trap, and believing that how you feel should decide what you do. You've been taught since childhood to follow your feelings. Do what feels right. Trust your gut. If it doesn't feel good, it's not for you. That advice sounds wise, but it's incomplete. Because feelings are not always signals of truth. They're signals of habit. What feels right is often just what feels familiar. So if you've spent years living in comfort, procrastination, or self-doubt, guess what will feel wrong? Discipline, structure, change. When you start trying to build discipline, your emotions will rebel. You'll feel resistance every time you try to push beyond your comfort zone. You'll feel irritation when the alarm goes off, frustration when things don't flow, doubt when the results don't come fast enough. And if you interpret those emotions as warnings, you'll stop. You'll tell yourself, this doesn't feel right, and you'll retreat back to comfort. But that bad feeling isn't danger. It's the discomfort of growth. The emotional trap is powerful because it convinces you that readiness is a feeling, that you'll know when it's time to move forward because you'll feel ready. But emotions don't predict readiness. They reflect comfort, and comfort and growth cannot coexist. The moment you start doing something meaningful, your emotions will try to drag you back to safety. Think about it. Every time you've delayed action, what stopped you wasn't lack of time or knowledge. It was how you felt. Tired, unmotivated, overwhelmed, uncertain. But those feelings aren't the truth. They're just emotional weather, temporary and constantly changing. Yet you've built your life around waiting for perfect emotional conditions. You wait for clarity before you start. You wait for confidence before you speak. You wait for inspiration before you work. And in doing so, you give your emotions authority they were never meant to have. Here's a harsh truth. If you only act when you feel like it, you'll spend your entire life watching people who didn't. Because those who rely on emotion for movement will always be outpaced by those who rely on principle. Self-discipline isn't built by eliminating emotions. It's built by learning not to obey them. You don't need to silence your emotions. You just need to stop negotiating with them. You can acknowledge fear without letting it dictate your choices. You can feel doubt without treating it as evidence. You can be tired and still keep your word. The strongest people in the world don't lack emotion. They simply refuse to be ruled by it. The emotional trap also disguises itself as intuition. You might tell yourself something just doesn't feel right, when what you actually mean is something feels uncomfortable. Intuition warns you of danger. Discomfort warns you of progress. They feel similar, but they lead to completely different lives. Most people never learn to tell the difference. Here's the key. Emotions were designed to react to your environment, not to lead your future. They're useful data, but they're not destiny. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel uncertain and still decide. You can feel unready and still begin. In fact, those emotions are the exact indicators that you're on the right path, because your comfort zone is shrinking, and that's what growth requires. The people who build unshakable self-discipline aren't emotionless robots. They simply act despite their emotions. They've trained themselves to associate discomfort with progress instead of threat. They've learned that the voice in their head saying "not today" is just resistance doing its job, and that the only way to quiet it is through action. The longer you listen to your emotions, the louder they become. But the moment you act, even a small step, the noise starts to fade. That's the paradox. You can't think your way into discipline. You can only act your way into it. The body moves first, the mind follows. So the next time you tell yourself, "I don't feel like it," remember this. That sentence has nothing to do with readiness. It's simply your brain trying to avoid friction. And every time you obey it, you reinforce weakness. Every time you act in spite of it, you reinforce strength. You'll never control your emotions completely, but you can control what they lead to. You can decide that fear means move, not stop. That discomfort means grow, not retreat. That uncertainty means begin, not wait. Because in the end, feelings are just noise, but action is signal. And once you learn that distinction, the emotional trap loses its grip. You stop needing to feel ready because you finally understand. Readiness isn't emotional. It's behavioral. It's not something you feel before you act. It's something you earn by acting repeatedly, even when it hurts. There's a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when something in you snaps. When you realize you've been living your life in hesitation, planning instead of doing, dreaming instead of building, thinking about who you want to become instead of doing what that person would do. That's when the shift begins, when you stop waiting for readiness and start realizing that readiness is a decision, not a feeling. You've spent years believing that there's some emotional switch that will one day flip inside you, a moment where fear will vanish and confidence will flood in. You picture yourself suddenly becoming disciplined, as if one morning you'll wake up transformed, motivated, and finally capable of doing all the things you've avoided. But that day doesn't exist, because readiness doesn't precede discipline. It's built through discipline. Think about the people you admire, the ones who wake up early, stick to their routines, train, study, build, endure. They don't have something you don't. They just stopped waiting for the feeling. They realized that success isn't emotional. It's mechanical. It's repetition, not revelation. They stopped asking, "Do I feel like it?" and started saying, "It's time." That's the moment everything changes. When you separate your emotions from your identity, you are not your fear. You are not your fatigue. You are not your doubt. You're the one who decides what those feelings mean. You can let them be signals to stop or proof that you're growing. That's what the disciplined person understands. Discomfort is not a reason to wait. It's a reason to move. The shift begins when you stop seeing discipline as something you build and start seeing it as something you choose. It's not a trait you're born with. It's not motivation that strikes randomly. It's a choice you make every time your emotions beg you to delay. Every time you act instead of wait, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. And every vote counts. You'll never become disciplined in your thoughts until you act disciplined in your behavior. Because discipline doesn't come from belief, it comes from proof. The mind follows the body. The more you act, the more your mind starts believing you're the kind of person who follows through. That's why waiting to feel ready is so dangerous. It keeps you trapped in thought, where fear grows and confidence fades. There's power in starting before you're ready, because it strips away your illusions. It forces you to confront your weakness, your lack of clarity, your discomfort. And in that confrontation, something shifts. You stop chasing the feeling of readiness and start cultivating the habit of resilience. You start realizing that readiness is not something you wait for. It's something you create through repetition. You see, the mind loves comfort, but comfort never changed anyone. The moment you move, even slightly, you send a new message to your brain. We act now. That one act begins to rewrite your entire identity. The person who used to wait starts to act. The person who used to fear failure starts to face it. And the person who used to doubt themselves starts collecting evidence that they can be trusted. You don't need to transform overnight. You just need to move before your brain finds another excuse not to. Because your excuses will always sound reasonable. They'll always sound mature. I just need to plan better. I'm not in the right place mentally. I'll start when life settles down. But life never settles down, and your mind will never hand you permission. You have to take it. The shift happens when you stop asking for emotional alignment and start demanding personal alignment. When you decide that your word carries more weight than your feelings, you'll still feel fear, doubt, fatigue, but you'll stop treating them as stop signs. You'll start treating them as mile markers. Proof that you're walking the right road. The first few steps will always feel wrong. You'll feel unprepared, awkward, uncertain. But that's not a flaw. That's the friction of transformation. Because readiness isn't the absence of discomfort. It's the ability to walk through it without losing direction. And something beautiful happens once you start doing this consistently. Your emotions start catching up. You begin to feel what you've been waiting to feel, not before the action, but after it. Confidence follows consistency. Motivation follows motion. Clarity follows commitment. Everything you've been chasing emotionally begins to appear, not as a cause, but as a result. That's the shift. The moment you stop living like a passenger in your own mind and start driving it. You stop waiting for the right moment because you understand that every moment you hesitate, you strengthen your weakness. And every moment you act, you strengthen your power. This is the turning point. When you stop waiting to feel ready and start realizing you were always capable, you just needed to prove it through action. Because readiness isn't a doorway you pass through. It's a muscle you build. And every time you act before you feel ready, that muscle grows stronger. Until one day the question, "Am I ready?" disappears. Because you'll know, readiness was never the goal. Movement was. The real breakthrough doesn't happen when you feel confident. It happens when you act without it. When you stop waiting for the right time, the right mood, the right version of yourself, and just start. When you finally understand that discipline is not a mood, but a muscle. The people who change their lives don't do it because they woke up motivated one day. They do it because they stopped giving their emotions veto power over their actions. You've spent years conditioning yourself to wait for energy before movement, but the truth is, movement creates energy. The act of starting, even clumsily, even unprepared, generates the very motivation you've been chasing. That's the secret most people never learn. Action doesn't follow readiness. Readiness follows action. You can't think your way into discipline. You have to move your way into it. The breakthrough happens the moment you stop negotiating with your feelings. When your alarm goes off and your mind says, "I'll start tomorrow," but your body moves anyway. When you want to quit halfway, but you finish because you said you would. When you stop needing to feel inspired and start realizing that integrity, not inspiration, is what builds transformation. It's in those small, unremarkable decisions where change begins. The decision to show up when you'd rather rest. The decision to stay focused when you'd rather drift. The decision to do the right thing when no one would know if you didn't. Those moments don't feel special. They don't feel exciting. They feel ordinary, even dull. But those are the moments that shape the person you become. The disciplined person doesn't look for motivation. They look for proof. Every time they keep their word, they collect evidence that they are capable, reliable, unstoppable. That evidence compounds. It becomes belief. And that belief becomes power. Discipline builds self-respect, the kind that can't be faked or borrowed from others. Once you taste that self-respect, everything changes. You stop chasing external validation because your actions already validate you. You stop needing others to believe in you because you've seen what happens when you believe in yourself through action. You realize that the version of you who was waiting for readiness was never weak, just misled. Because readiness doesn't show up at your door. You build it through repetition, through resistance, through the refusal to delay another day. The breakthrough isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with a spark of enlightenment or a surge of energy. It's quiet, subtle. It happens in silence. In the moment you stop waiting for the right conditions and start creating them. It happens the first time you act while afraid instead of waiting to be fearless. The first time you start while uncertain instead of waiting for clarity. The first time you move while unmotivated instead of waiting for drive. And something powerful happens after that. Momentum. Momentum is the fuel of discipline. It's the proof that small steps create big shifts. You start to see that every time you act, your resistance gets weaker. Every time you move forward, hesitation loses its grip. And once you've experienced that, you'll never again confuse readiness with progress. You'll see that readiness is the reward of doing, not the requirement for starting. Here's the truth most people will never accept. The perfect moment will never come. You will never feel 100% ready, confident, or certain. But none of that matters, because the future doesn't belong to the most prepared. It belongs to the most committed. The ones who move before they know how. The ones who learn by doing. The ones who act in faith, not comfort. That's what separates the disciplined from the dreamers. Dreamers keep waiting for emotional permission. Disciplined people act because their word is law. Dreamers romanticize potential. Disciplined people build proof. Dreamers need to feel ready. Disciplined people understand that feeling is irrelevant. The decision is what counts. The breakthrough, then, is this realization. You can't think your way into the person you want to be. You can only act your way there. Your future self isn't waiting for you to feel prepared. They're waiting for you to take the first imperfect step. You'll look back one day and realize something remarkable, that everything you wanted began the moment you stopped needing to feel ready and simply decided to move. That's when discipline becomes natural, not forced, not tiring, just who you are. Because readiness was never the problem. Waiting was. There's a simple equation that governs every transformation in your life. Action, momentum, readiness. Most people live it backward. They think readiness comes first, that they need to feel confident, inspired, or clear before they take the first step. But discipline flips the formula. It teaches you that action creates momentum, and momentum creates readiness. You move first, the feeling follows. The reason this equation matters is because it breaks the illusion of control. You've been trying to control your emotions, to control when motivation strikes, to control when you'll feel ready. But emotions are unpredictable, and waiting for them makes you powerless. Discipline puts the control back in your hands, not by eliminating emotion, but by making emotion irrelevant. You act whether you feel like it or not. Let's break this down. When you take action, you disrupt the pattern of hesitation. You tell your brain that resistance isn't a stop sign. It's a cue to begin. That one small act, opening your notebook, putting on your shoes, turning off distractions, triggers momentum. Momentum is what most people mistake for motivation. It's that sense of movement, of forward progress, that builds confidence as you go. And that momentum eventually leads to readiness, the state of mind you were waiting for all along. Except now, it's not imaginary. It's earned. This is the discipline equation in motion. It's why people who start before they feel ready always surpass those who wait. Because movement builds emotional alignment, not the other way around. You don't find flow, you enter it by starting clumsily, awkwardly, imperfectly. The brain rewards completion, not contemplation. Every time you act, your brain releases dopamine, not for success, but for progress. That's why small wins matter. They teach your nervous system that effort equals reward. So when you hesitate, your brain learns that hesitation is safe. When you act, your brain learns that action is survival. The more you repeat that cycle, the easier it becomes. You're literally rewiring your identity from someone who waits to someone who moves. And that identity shift, not motivation, not inspiration, is what keeps you consistent long-term. The discipline equation also reveals why people quit so easily. They start by relying on emotion, the rush of inspiration. But when that fades, they interpret the absence of motivation as failure. In truth, it's just the moment where discipline should take over. The most disciplined people understand that boredom, frustration, and doubt aren't signs to stop. They're signs that the work is working. Because real change happens past the point where you'd normally quit. You have to train yourself to act independent of how you feel, to stop measuring progress by emotional intensity and start measuring it by consistency. That's how you win the long game. Because if your effort depends on your emotions, you'll be unreliable. But if your effort depends on your decisions, you become unstoppable. Action first, emotion later, and that's the code. You don't wait to want it, you move until you do. You don't wait to believe in yourself. You act until belief appears. You don't wait to understand. You move until understanding arrives. Discipline doesn't demand that you feel strong, only that you show up. It's simple but not easy because your brain will fight this logic every step of the way. It will tell you that acting without readiness is reckless, that waiting for clarity is mature. But what it's really saying is, stay where it's safe. Discipline is the refusal to accept that lie. It's the recognition that safety and stagnation often wear the same disguise. Here's the truth. You don't need to fix your mindset before you act. You fix your mindset by acting. You don't need to build confidence before you begin. You build confidence through repetition. You don't need to be ready. You need to be willing. Willing to move, willing to fail, willing to start again. The discipline equation works every time, in every area of life. Start small. Act before you're ready. Let the motion create momentum. Let the momentum create readiness. Then repeat. Over time, you'll stop asking, how do I get motivated? Because you'll already be in motion, and motion sustains itself. That's when you realize something profound. Discipline isn't about control. It's about direction. It's not about forcing yourself into perfection. It's about steering yourself toward purpose, regardless of mood or circumstance. And once you understand that, hesitation no longer stands a chance. Because the secret to mastering discipline isn't to feel ready, it's to stop needing to. Stand still for a moment, no distractions, no noise, no phone in your hand, and face the mirror. Look at yourself, not in the way you usually do when you're rushing out the door, but with honesty. The face staring back at you knows every time you've said, "I'll start tomorrow." It remembers every unfinished plan, every promise broken in silence, every excuse disguised as logic. You can't hide from that version of yourself. They've seen everything. Ask yourself something simple but terrifyingly real. How many times have I delayed my future because I was waiting to feel ready? How many mornings have passed while you waited for the spark that never came? How many opportunities have you let fade because comfort convinced you that now isn't the time? You already know the truth. There will never be a perfect moment. There will never be a version of you that feels entirely fearless, completely motivated, or fully confident. Those emotions belong to the person you become through discipline, not the one you are before it. That's the mirror's lesson. Readiness is not something you find. It's something you earn by acting when it's hardest to do so. It's forged in the mornings when you'd rather stay in bed, in the moments when you want to quit but choose not to, in the silence between decision and doubt where most people freeze. The reflection looking back at you doesn't need another plan. It needs proof. You've waited long enough. You've thought, planned, dreamed, and analyzed every detail. But there comes a point when thinking becomes hiding, when preparation becomes procrastination, when the question isn't, "What if I fail?" but "What if I keep waiting and never find out?" You don't need to feel ready to start rebuilding yourself. You just need to decide that your future is worth more than your hesitation, that your goals deserve more than your excuses, that you're done mistaking fear for logic. Because readiness isn't an emotion, it's a moment. And that moment is now. So look at your reflection one last time and ask, if not now, when? Then walk away and prove your answer through action. If this message reached you, it's because a part of you is done waiting. You're not here by accident. You're here because you've outgrown your excuses. So take this moment and turn it into movement. Stop saving your potential for a day that never comes. Start showing up for the life that's already waiting for you. If this spoke to something inside you, stay. Subscribe to this channel because here we build what others only talk about: self-discipline, mental strength, and the courage to become the version of yourself your future needs. And before you leave, ask yourself one question. Will you keep waiting to feel ready, or will you start becoming ready by acting now? Because transformation doesn't start someday. It starts today.